Welcome to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read along podcast. The Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
That is your host, Greg, who somehow still knows very little about the Wheel of Time, even though he usually pretends otherwise.
And that is Tylor, our resident expert, who makes sure you know how much he knows about the Wheel of Time.
It's a lot. Join us each week as we continue our journey through Robert Jordan's great fantasy epic, exploring the books, the television show, ill advised discussions of visual media on a non visual podcast, and so much more. Although, actually, not. It's just that.
Yes, all that and actually nothing else as we travel on. And I know what this means now. Through the glass columns.
Yeah, he really doesn't know all that much.
No, you don't know that much.
Namaste, and welcome back to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly read along mindfulness podcast. I am your host, Greg, who's feeling very calm and zen about some pretty exciting chapters we have to read. Joining me, a ball of warped fragility and emotion, it's Tylor. Tylor, how's it going?
It's going well. You kind of guessed how I was feeling because I was making a face through the entirety of that introduction that may or may not have been related to my feelings about the Mad Men finale. So that's usually what I think of when someone starts to do meditation. I agree with you. These were not action-packed chapters, but they were fun, exciting chapters. And actually, the question that I kind of wanted to lead off with is, I know for much of this book, you have been frustrated with the Saladar plot. I know you were kind of ready for the, resistance movement, and instead you got a bunch of backroom politics that our characters don't fully understand. How much are you now feeling better about this plot, seeing what it is? Because it's still very political, but it's not where it was in terms of just being a complete standstill.
Well, if my word for a few episodes ago was stagnation, I would say the stagnation has ended. Things are moving, things are changing, and, while it is not a very action-heavy week, it just felt like everything was moving forward. So
Yeah.
I was feeling pretty good about this plot in this chapter. I will say there's an exception, which is keeping it broadly spoiler-free, because I think it's the second chapter. There's round robin of all these people you barely remember reacting to things you barely understand in a whole bunch of POVs that I was like, I don't know what's going on here.
Oh, that was the end of the first chapter. Feel free to talk
okay.
as much as you want to about how much
Perfect.
you didn't like those scenes.
So those were ones where, my first thought was, of course, never going to remember these. And then it was nicely constructed in that I'm like, oh, there's lots of small little variations here I'm supposed to revel in, but I have so much trouble keeping track of all those Aes Sedai. I felt like I wasn't getting as much out of them as I was supposed to. So we'll talk about it. But in general, very positive. I don't mean to go negative. I thought these were exciting. It was funny when we switched to the second POV. I was like, oh, man, I'm really sad to lose that area because now we're going somewhere completely different. Forgetting that wasn't true in the slightest, that he was approaching that same plot line. So it was very funny to me that I'd just completely forgotten that. So I had a great time, and I kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago. I spent the weekend reading a different book, and it was one of those books where I was so excited to get to it, and I just could not put it down. I read a 400-page book in 2 days, and I was like, this is how I would be in this part of the Wheel of Time if I were allowed to be, right? I probably would have raced to the end of Lord of Chaos, even though we have solid just under 300 pages left. I probably would have cruised. So it's good. You got to take your gourmet food and you just got to nibble it. You got to taste it, let it sit on your palate, and then maybe someday finish it.
So before I go into the summary of Chapter 37, which is the next thing I will do, I need to do a completely unpodcast-related thing and ask you if the 400-page book you devoured is the same as the last 400-page book I devoured. Was it The Dark Forest?
It wasn't. No,
Okay.
It was what I mentioned a few moments ago. So Star Wars has had this big publishing initiative going on called the High Republic. It started in 2021, I think. It was supposed to start in 2020. It got delayed because of pandemic. And it was the big grand finale to that. I'm like, oh, I have been waiting to get this in my hand and to read that. And then I did a funny thing where it came in the mail on Tuesday, and it was like I couldn't bring myself to actually start it for a few days.
I do that with video games. I can't do the last mission.
I'm like, I'm just so excited. And then I finally was like, yesterday morning, I helped get my kids to a birthday party. And then I said, okay, I'm just going to like sit on, we're in the middle, who knows when we're recording, but there's an awful heat wave in Boston. So I sat under my umbrella in the backyard with a giant iced coffee, and I just sat and read. And I did about half yesterday. Then I got up this morning, read our solid 40 pages, and then read the rest of that. So but the Dark Forest is in my vacation stack. I'm very excited. I actually my wife and I went to a nice bookstore on Friday, and you know that pressure where you're like, I gotta make a purchase. I bought the third one in 3 Body Problems, so I can take both on vacation and cruise through. So I'm
if you need something to read, those 3 books, the 3 Body Problem, the Dark Forest, and Life's End, Death's End, something like that.
Death's End, I believe.
Yeah.
The
Incredible.
Is a different translator, just to totally derail our Wheel of Time, I guess. But in case people wondered, we do read other things.
Chapter 37, When Battle Begins. Elaine and Nynaeve have a moment when they confess that they captured Moghedien. Egwene asks basically none of the questions she has, but instead tells them to bring Moghedien. Egwene tells Elaine that she won't ask about Brigitte without mentioning Brigitte, and Elaine says that she may be able to say more soon. Egwene then pieces together some of the details about Brigitte and her interactions with Moghedien, and Egwene then lays out her plans for an exchange of trainees between the Wise Ones and the Aes Sedai, and also her plans to invite older women to become novices, which she's pleased to observe has already started in Saladar. She also notes that she wants women who can only channel weekly, similar to Cerelia, to have a place, and also the Windfinders to have a place as well. Egwene expresses her frustration at Rand's amnesty, and then Merrigan enters and is revealed to be Moghedien. The disguises of the power are explained to Egwene, and then she puts on the Adam bracelet and is honestly kind of terrifying. She threatens to kill Moghedien if she lies, and then asks her about Rand's method of channeling. Moghedien says that she can teach them the correct way to channel with some difficulty, but when Egwene does it herself, she is clearly terrified. Elaine is amazed, and Nynaeve seems upset that she can't see in the weaves to learn it, and at this point Egwene threatens Moghedien to, if she ever lies, she will be killed immediately, and then she apologizes to Elaine and Nynaeve for taking over their situation with Moghedien. Nynaeve at this point is trying to get herself angry when Siuan enters. Egwene dismisses Moghedien, and Egwene then tells Siuan that she knows everything and brushes off the upset response, and then dismisses Elaine and Nynaeve so that she can go talk more with Moghedien. Egwene first implores that and then demands Siuan's help, and Siuan agrees, seemingly realizing that everyone has underestimated Egwene, and she is not going to be the pushover they expected. At this point, they agree to cooperate with one another, with Egwene being the one in charge, and they begin to have a discussion of what they are going to do in Saladar, and what they are able to do and what they cannot. At this point, we switch into Romanda's POV, who meets with 3 sitters who are all in her pocket, thinking of the balance of power in Saladar, and she wonders where Dallana is as she schemes to limit Sheriam's power. We then switch into Lelane's POV, who has 4 sitters on her side and discusses limiting Sheriam and wonder where Dallana is. We then switch into Dallana's POV, who pleads with Halima that she can't be on everyone's side at once, but Halima is only concerned with gentling Logain. Dallana wishes that she could kill Halima, but eventually agrees to her commands, remembering that she is one of the Forsaken. We then switch into Siuan's POV, who meets with Lelaine, complaining about Egwene's lack of etiquette, and then Siuan says that Egwene was complaining about Romanda, who apparently had a plan to not move anywhere, and Siuan thinks that the plan is working, and then thinks how rewarding it will be to train a great Amerlin. We then switch into Nynaeve's point of view, who acts surprised when Romanda isn't working on her block. Romanda doubts that she is truly an Aes Sedai, despite what Egwene said, and then she sets her to talking about Lelaine's plans, which are apparently to not move the Aes Sedai. We then switch into Elaine's POV, who helps Sheriam with a dream terrangriel, and then asks for help with Egwene, who has apparently been facing down Ramonda and Lelaine about not wanting to move the Aes Sedai. Elaine says that Egwene is worried if she agrees that she will to stay put, that she will lose her ability to say no in the future, and Sheriam agrees to help. We then switch to Egwene's POV, who thinks that she has taken her first steps as a Merlin, and the wise ones would be proud. So let's ignore the last half of that chapter, Greg, because apparently we need to remind us of all of the players in Saladar, because we need to be reminded of all the players in Saladar. But the first half, you said you liked. What were your favorite moments, or what kind of stood out to you here?
Well, it fits this pattern in this book, which, if there's a subtitle to this Lord of Chaos, it would be like how to lead, right? Because we've seen over and over again different kind of theories of how one becomes a good leader. And I thought this was the chance to see Egwene kind of rise. I mean, she rose to power last chapter, but to see how she's going to start to do this felt like the kind of main goal of this chapter. And I will say, I don't think she's as savvy as maybe a Tom or an Elaine or a Morghese, but seems pretty good, right? Like clearly has a clear sense of the balance between what she owes to others and what she wants to do herself, and kind of acts in a pretty savvy fashion to gain some allies and connect with, maybe strengthen is the better word, bonds that could help her in the future.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right to focus on those kind of positive links that Egwene is making, because that's really what, at the end of the chapter, ends up benefiting her, right? Having so many emissaries to send out who can be in on the true plan and she can trust them, I think is the only reason she's able to do anything in this chapter. But what really interested me is how all of that is actually preceded by her taking a character she's never met before and absolutely breaking them spiritually. Like, I know we're supposed to be happy for Egwene at the end of this chapter, but I'm also terrified of Egwene at the end of the Moghedien section of this chapter. And I think it's worth noting that the first person who has really been able to get Moghedien doing what they want is the only one who's ever been in an Adam before, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Good point, and interesting. And I liked her reaction at the start of that to be like, oh my God, you've got her in an Adam. Like, she's really scared and nervous because she understands that.
To be clear, listeners, I just want to point out, it was Adam on the TV show, but Bezos canceled it, so I can say whatever I want to now.
I hate that when you have something in your head a certain way for like 20 years and then you're like, I gotta switch that.
You mean Nineveh? Yeah, I know.
Or for me in Star Wars, Coruscant, right?
Yeah.
And I never expected it to be a soft C, and then Phantom Menace came along, and there we were.
So in addition to Egwene being terrifying, I think that she's also really clever in the way that she approaches Elaine about Birgitte, like very much dancing around the issue and explaining her position without saying that she knows what's going on. And I thought that Elaine kind of being both surprised and happy about that was a really kind of interesting moment for both of those characters, to see them dancing around something that both of them know and both of them know the other one knows, but neither of them can say it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it shows that everybody has leveled up in terms of their politics style, right? Like that's the skill tree they assigned their points to last round. It's interesting, and then I should save some of those comments for the future, because Brigitte is kind of in the shadow of all three chapters tonight. Just like her presence and kind of the piece of the puzzle that is really unsettled in a lot of what's going on here. But I did like that, and when Egwene starts to map out how she's going to try to draw all women to her, that is very interesting, how she doesn't care about some of those old secrets and things like that. It's like, oh no, it's going to be like a new order here. And I think all of this hints towards that.
Yeah, and I think actually tying that together, the way that Egwene is able to be really, really direct about the sea folk and be like, I did not get this from you, I figured it out on my own, but it perfectly fits what I'm doing, I think that stands in such stark contrast to how delicate she was about Birgitte, that it kind of shows Egwene not only is being a good friend, but she's also really deft about how to almost code switch in this interesting way with Elaine, who has so many different faces. I thought it was just fun to see Egwene really on and nailing it, because for so long she's been either in Moraine's shadow or the Wise One's shadow or Siuan's shadow. It's nice to see her just totally dominate the conversation, and to see her have a really clear plan of her own is also really reassuring after so many plot lines seem to be pointing to whoever the Merlin would be, she'd be a puppet.
Well, and I do think everything you just said is also just important for me as a reader to be like, can she handle this? Because her, I kind of saw this coming down the road, but it happened so quickly. I think as a reader, I wanted reassurance that my good friend Egwene is going to be okay. And it's
totally.
It's immediately there. Like, she's showing the people around her, she's forming plans, and it's really just demonstrating that we should trust her and see what she does with it, because she's got good ideas.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly the right read. Any last thoughts, or I guess the last portion here before we go into the many POVs is Siuan and Egwene. And I'll be honest, I don't know that there's anything here that makes me go like, oh man, I love this, I'm so excited for it. But I will remember this interaction every single time I think of Egwene's plotline of just like, oh, I really thought you were going to be a pushover, but you're going to ruin all of us. And that's the moment that I really went from Siuan being like, I don't quite know what her motivations are, to like, oh, she will jump on this because she thinks that Egwene is such a winner. Greg is getting a drink.
Do you like I had a small boy come serve me water? Thank you, Henry. I forgot my water upstairs despite having put fresh ice in it, and I was like, oh no, I'm already coughing. I'm going to need this. Yes. Well, I'm struggling in my head. I did want to backtrack to one thing, but let's just address the Siuan thing first. It felt to me like Siuan was muted, right? Like,
yeah.
I think I had assumed Siuan would kind of become the Moraine to Egwene's Rand and just be like her mentor, her Merlin or some such. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's going to be a more strained relationship than I expected. And I'm interested in Siuan because I still feel like she's not back fully, right? Like, yeah, she's kind of half back, and it's like that's got to be deeply frustrating if you're her, right? And then to see somebody who's less competent than you were get your old job, right? I guess we've all been there, right?
Yeah, it was shocking to see how okay with that Siuan seemed to be at the end of this chapter, right? I think I was in the same place as you. I would have assumed like these two will work together, it will be a productive relationship, but Siuan will hate every moment of it. And it seems like she is already resigned to like, okay, if the best thing I can do is be a teacher, I'm going to teach the greatest person I can. And good on her, I guess. It's just not what I expected from that character.
So the only other thing I had in my notes about that early section is the demonstration of transporting, right?
Yes.
That Egwene does in the presence of Moghedien, right? And Moghedien, as I recall, they react with like, oh my God, who taught you how to do that? Like, yeah. Oh, you shouldn't be able to do that. But it seemed notable that Elaine watches her and she's like, oh, do that one more time and then I can do it. And you also have this like really powerful Forsaken in the room, like watching. And I think that I'm reading that as like Moghedien probably already had this, but it's like, I don't know. I would be careful about demonstrating abilities that are easily learned in front of somebody very powerful.
I think that's fair. There is a hint, I forget if it's in the second or third chapter, that after this, the girls start getting interested in like ancient techniques that have been lost. And so I think that's the logic Robert Jordan wants us to be following, is that we know traveling existed in the era of the Forsaken, so she must have known it. But I think you are right to say if there are things the Forsaken don't know, teaching them things sounds like a very, very bad idea. I think that's exactly right.
Well, and it just goes back to this lesson nobody learns of like, be careful what you do when you don't know who's watching, right? Like this is the Tylor Riod lesson that they keep forgetting. It's like, maybe hold back a little. For as much as we see them leveling up in certain ways, it's like, I don't know.
Okay, so after that, we have, I believe by my count, 7 POVs in about 4 pages. Let's make sure we've got all of the groups. The first POV is Romanda, who has 3 other sitters in her group for 4 total. And she is 1, trying to stop Lelaine, 2, trying to stop Sheriam, and 3, wondering why Delana isn't at her meeting. We then have Lelaine, who has 4 others in her group, so 5 total. That puts us at 9 in those 2 groups, which notably is exactly half of the sitters in Saladar. Her main goals seem to be stop Romanda, stop Sheriam, and also where in the world is Delana? She should be here. We then check in with Delana, who is being told by a Forsaken to play all sides. And then Sheriam is the last one. She doesn't get a POV. I think it's Elaine who is talking to her. But she seems to have an interest in making sure that Egwene can stand up to Romanda and Lelaine. And so it seems like what's going on here is we have 3 groups that are probably roughly equal in size, right? It seems like Romanda has 4, Lelaine has 5, Sheriam presumably has 5 or 6 because that's how many people are in her cluster, and then Delana and maybe 1 or 2 other free agents. So what we've got in a democracy is you need 2 groups to agree with each other in order to get things done. And I think the lesson of these little POVs is that Egwene is very effectively convincing the groups about what the other groups want, so that all of them will do what Egwene wants, thinking they're opposing Romanda or Lelaine or Sheriam.
Well, what comes to mind, it's a classic Simpsons joke that everybody uses about Donald Trump as well, which is Mr. Burns has so many illnesses that they're all crammed trying to get through the door, and they just keep each other in balance.
I thought you were going to tell me not to blame me because you voted for Kodos, but
either way. And so that people use that to talk about like how many controversies are going on at any given time in this political moment, because then it's like we can't concentrate on any one. So I felt that way. It's like at the moment, well, and then the end of the Mr. Burns joke that people always seem to forget is Mr. Burns goes, "So you're telling me I'm invincible?" And the doctor says, "No, you're like really, really fragile," right? Or something along those lines. And so it feels like that's kind of the lesson here, right? Is that at the moment, Egwene is kind of invincible, but I would say it's a very tenuous balance, and it's just going to take like a little push one way or a little pull another to get all of these fighting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I just want to note one more thing here, which is that for all of Egwene's talk about uniting the channelers and letting people channel at younger ages and bringing together the wise ones and all of that, what she's pushing for in this meeting is she wants everyone fighting against not moving. That's it. She wants the Aes Sedai to be moving. And that seems like a weird goal for all of this political maneuvering. So I think we as readers need to start wondering, what does she want out of leaving Saladar?
But it is moving, not yet defined as retaking the White Tower, right?
Correct.
It doesn't seem to be that. It's keep us moving.
That is exactly right.
That makes me, I'm just going to speculate. She wants to be someplace where Rand doesn't know where they are. I guess that doesn't quite work. It would work by the end of these chapters, but she's not totally aware where Rand knows where she is. And then, it seems to me that Egwene's new cool lifestyle has opened up a big chunk of the map. That was. And so they could all move to, say, Ruidian, where there's like a big empty city and a whole bunch of stuff, right? Some glass columns, among other things.
We have some wild predictions from Greg, and I am here for it.
But it just seems like it's either the options seem to be to gain strength or to hide, or to hide while you gain strength and then go for the White Tower, because I don't think her rule can be legitimate until she rules from the tower. Fully legitimate, let's say.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And figuring out how Egwene is going to work these politics, because I think you're exactly right to say it's working out for her now, but the second the fight breaks out, everything falls apart for Egwene. And so watching her kind of thread that needle is what I'm really excited about at the end of this chapter. Any final thoughts before I summarize chapter 38?
No, we got... Oh, one. It's actually my first note, but I had put my book down covering it, so I went back all the way to the beginning. Just the chapter title, right, is a really interesting one for this chapter, and it's like, wait, what? Like, seeing it come up as when battle begins, I'm like, oh, here we go, like armies, let's clash. And I think this just is Robert Jordan reminding us these battles matter just as much, if not more, than those battles, right? That we're seeing. This is the one day more of the great political battle of the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, this very much feels like what would be the title of a West Wing episode, and so I have no objection to it in a chapter that probably could have been like 7 walk and talks if you really wanted to organize it that way. Chapter 38. A sudden chill. Mat rides through the bare trees in the heat, which is weird. Aviendha trots alongside, keeping pace with the horses. Ulver makes his disdain for her clear, as he's still upset about the Aiel killing his family, and they apparently have been traveling for 3 days, but still no sign of any Dragonsworn. The scouts, including Chel Vannin, arrive, reporting that they have found the Aes Sedai, and Vannin apparently went into and out of the village himself. Mat tells the band that they are not there to fight, but they should prepare to be attacked, just to be seen as defensive, because once that is seen, it will be known that they're not aggressive. When she knows where Saladar is, Aviendha immediately begins to sprint away, and then Mat tells Ulver to teach Darad how to play snakes and foxes, and then Mat's group quickly catches up to Aviendha, which strikes him as odd because he knows that she can run faster than the horses, and at this point, she asks him about Ulver's parents, and Mat asks if she thinks that she owes him anything once he confirms how they died, and Aviendha seems confused by this idea, saying there is no way that she could have tow for the actions of someone else, but she also thinks that Mat needs to be a better dad to Ulver. At this point, they ride into Saladar, and oddly, Aviendha chooses to ride on the horses rather than run alongside. At this point, Mat sees a woman who he recognizes from his old memories, but then he puts her out of his mind. He then asks after Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine, to the first Aes Sedai he sees, and is surprised when he is told that he can meet with the Amerlin, hopefully. As they wait, Aviendha is surrounded by Aes Sedai, who try to ask her numerous questions about individuals who can channel and wasting sickness, and as they are waiting, one of the novices, Nicola, says that Mat glows, and it's identified by Anaya that she may be able to see ta'veren. Anaya then asks Aviendha her name and many questions about the Aiel, and at this point, Nynaeve arrived, shocked that Mat is in charge of an army, and takes him to the Amerlin, leaving behind an overwhelmed Aviendha. Nynaeve deduces that Rand set Mat, and Mat reacts to Egwene in the stole of the Amerlin, thinking that it is a prank and trying to get her away before she can get in trouble. He tries to get her to take off the stole, and his amulet prevents someone from channeling at him, and Mat then begins to talk over all of the women's questions and lays out his and Rand's plans for them to go to Caemlyn. He says that once the Amerlin arrives, he will rescue them all with his army if need be, and demands a thank you when a servant arrives and reveals that Egwene is actually the Amerlin, and Mat is shocked. So honestly, this is a fun chapter because Mat not knowing things, always a good time. What did you appreciate about A Sudden Chill?
I mean, this is essentially like a big sitcom gag, and it totally works still, right? Like, there are some small revelations around the ending, but the goal seems to be to just drive at that punchline of a man full of himself saying a bunch of things only to be demonstrated to be very stupid, and it works. It's very funny.
Yeah, I have no objection to this. Like, I would 100% have watched the Wheel of Time sitcom that was just 20 episodes of this, right? Give me an Aiel throuple that lives next door to some very, tasteful people from Caemlyn, and I will watch as many seasons of that show as you want to put in front of me. The first people I would cast in that show, honestly, Mat and Ulver. Like, I love this relationship. There were multiple moments in this chapter where I was just like, yeah, this kid rules. Like, he's not doing anything exciting, but giving Mat a foil like Ulver is exactly what that character needed.
And, I liked Aviendha becoming the third party, kind of watching and being like, dude, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, didn't we talk about Big Daddy last week? I feel like it's that
think you're
again, right? Just this is gonna become a Big Daddy podcast. But like, you have the Leslie Mann character, I think, who's like watching.
You're doing better than I would.
I think that's right, right? She's the actress who's married.
I
to
think
Judd
you're right, yeah.
Apatow. Yeah, and is just like watching, and I think at some point like it helps him parent just slightly. It's like, yeah, like this should not be happening. How is this happening? So I liked that as well, and I liked her phrasing of like he's not old enough to be only around men or grown men, emphasizing the age, not the gender. But it was really good.
Yeah, no, and I think my favorite moment in there is when Matt sends Oliver off, and he's like, "Oh, go teach that military commander how to play the game that you cannot win with the dice." And I think that is just hilarious. It is high everything I want from Matt and Oliver. And then Avienda is more observant than I expect, and the way that she thinks about honor contrasting with the way that Matt thinks about honor, I thought was really fascinating. To see Matt go like, if that happened, if my culture was responsible for his family's death, I would want to do something, and clearly he is, and he does feel that way. And then to see Avienda just go, no, not my problem, but in the most like honorable, of course I would if it was my fault way, I thought it was really telling about both of those value systems.
Yeah, and also just underlying like goodwill between them, right? Like these aren't two characters I would necessarily want like or would have expected them to get along great, and I'm not sure they do. But like Avienda wants him to do right by this kid, right? And I think that's just like she's a genuinely good person, and like she has no reason to care about this kid, but would also just care about this kid, and it works.
Yeah, this is actually something that I kind of joke around with a mutual friend of ours who is fairly religious, and I am not at all religious. And we're always like, look, if we end up in the same place, who cares how we get there? And I think that Matt and Avienda have that moment in this chapter. They're like, I don't understand you and your values. You don't understand me and my values, but we both like this Ulver kid, and we both seem to want him to go well, so done. Let's do it. That's the end of the conversation. And right. I really appreciate that.
This is more for us than anything, but it's very funny you bring up our mutual friend in this particular moment, because he sent me a very long text message today about how he had a dream where I was busy, so he put my son to bed and read him a story and decided he could be a father because of that dream. Like, in the dream, so, like, that's all Matt needs. He needs a dream about putting the kid to bed.
And he got one, and now he's a father. It's weird. I do need to call out one really itty-bitty, teeny-tiny, weird moment. Matt and everyone ride into the village, and then Matt goes, "Oh, I recognize that person from one of my old 1,000-year-old memories." No big deal. Probably nothing.
Well, so maybe I misread that. I thought he recognized her from blowing the horn, right? Like, but you're saying it was clearly like the old memories.
It could be either, I suppose. Okay. But the thing is, he knows Birgitta, and he doesn't call it out as Birgitta, right?
So he must have known her. You're saying he could have known her both times, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So either he saw Birgitta and just didn't notice it, and that's what he's calling out here, or I'm wondering if Halima looks like a former Forsaken, because we know they are a Forsaken reborn, or whether one of the other Forsaken is around and not in a disguise. Or I even thought, like, if Mogadien's disguise was based on someone from the old days, and so it looks just like someone he had seen before. Like, I think any of those are in play, although I think you're right, Birgitta is probably suspect number one, even though I think it might be suspicious he didn't identify her.
Yeah, I mean, I can't pretend my mind went any further. I'm just like, oh, he remembers Birgitta. But that would be very interesting if we specifically got Matt's old life dated to the Age of Heroes, essentially, with something like that. It's a little sloppier than that makes it sound. But, that's cool, and that's an interesting thought. In terms of him not doing anything about it, I kind of didn't bump on that because he's got all these weird things. Like, he sometimes speaks in the old tongue, and he just moves along, right? So I felt like whatever it was, he's like, yeah, that's just a weird part of being me. Anyway, on to the tower.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely valid. I do you think that there is something really interesting then about this moment where Aviendha gets swarmed by the Aes Sedai, which I just think is funny. The moment that made me laugh the most in the entire 3 chapters is Matt walking away and her giving him the help me eyes and him not being able to do anything about it. But I also thought it was really interesting to see a new power among the Aes Sedai, that at least one of them can see ta'veren. And that I feel like it feels like it's setting up a Chekhov's ability to see ta'veren or something. Like, this has to be meaningful sometime down the road.
Yeah, I liked that, and it was funny, the like reaction. I mean, I don't really have a comparison. There's a little of this with Jedi in Star Wars, but the teacher or the handler is just like, "Oh, wow, one of your new powers manifested. Isn't that good for you?" And then like carry on. So I also had that same thought. I'm like, well, that seems notable, right? And I don't know. It's interesting because so far everybody who's a ta'veren, we just get told like, "You're ta'veren, don't worry about it," right? Like, but in book world, that would be not Egwene still, right? Like, that's only TV show world. But it made me assume that at some point, it could either be these are called into question, or I think more likely we have a new person arise, and that young child could identify them.
Yeah, I think that's right. Then what we're left with is something that I can sum up with a song that luckily is in the public domain. How did you feel about Matt making a fool of himself? I laughed.
I laughed a lot too, and I actually really, really liked that it was Nynaeve who got the last line and says, "You should pick up your jaw," which is, just great and works to create the full visual. I guess we won't get to see this, but it would have been great to see the Matt actor, who I found pretty good, the new Matt actor anyway, get to play that scene. But I haven't finished the 3rd season yet, but I'm guessing we don't get there.
We do not, sadly. I do just want to note once again that Matt's amulet is now causing problems for multiple Aes Sedai, and they seem to be getting curious about it, right? Elaine and Egwene are both noted in the description as trying to figure out what is going on when someone channels at Matt and it doesn't work. And I also just find Nynaeve still being angry that she can't channel to be really funny. Any last notes on the end of this chapter?
I just had down that the medallion got very cold, which I didn't remember as a past detail.
I think it's happened once before. This is maybe the first time that Matt realizes that it specifically gets cold when it is absorbing the one power.
So I find myself wanting to map snakes and foxes onto the male-female sides of the power, right? Don't. Okay. This just seems to make him immune to all power.
That seems to be accurate. It is worth noting there are weird exceptions. It seems like, for example, he was killed by either balefire or the effects of balefire in the previous book, and then was brought back when Ravin died by balefire, and so things went back in time. So it might be something like, you can't touch me with the power, but if you light a fire with the power, it can still burn me. Or you can't throw me with the power, but you can still throw... excuse me, you can throw a rock at me. Okay. And so I think that's kind of where he's at. He's protected, but there are limits to it. Clearly, he can be affected in some way because it killed him once already.
Well, and I will just take this opportunity to say that snake and fox piece is the piece that's sticking in my craw the most, meaning only that I want to figure it out. It feels the most puzzling to me. If understanding this as our world and derivative of our world, that seems to like be totally separate and so different. And I just want to, my desire to map that was purely out of like, I want to figure out that piece because it feels very important, yet totally separate from like everything else other than, you know, the visits he took and then the game. It was a game.
Yes, a game.
Cool. So I want to figure that out, but I don't think I'll get to for a while.
You will figure that out in approximately 8 books, which may or may not be hyperbole. I actually don't think it is. Chapter 39, possibilities. Egwene suppresses all of her questions and insists that a flummoxed Matt bring her chair. Matt says being the Merlin will end with Egwene dead and suggests that they flee through a gateway like he had originally planned. Nynaeve literally kicks Matt, who responds angrily, staring at her when she remembers the amulet, but Egwene diffuses the situation by offering to diffuse tensions between Gareth Brine and the Band of the Red Hand. Matt says that Rand can negotiate a solution with Elida, but Egwene insists that she will not swear to Rand and she will not have any of the Aes Sedai do so either. She warns him off trying to get any of the Aes Sedai onto Rand's side. Matt then angrily goes off to find Tom, but is told that he cannot leave Saladar. He says that he will leave when he likes, and Egwene then dismisses Nynaeve, and Elaine is... she dismisses Nynaeve and Elaine's anger at Matt, when at this point Elaine asks if the plan is to bring the band into Gareth Brine's army. Egwene explains her alternative plan, which Elaine thinks is brilliant, but we don't get let in on, and then Nynaeve says that Matt won't go along, but Egwene thinks that he made a promise to Rand, and he always keeps his promise, so she can take advantage of that. Elaine then suggests taking Matt to Ibu Dar with them, and Egwene agrees, as she has heard stories of duels and deaths in Ibu Dar. Egwene has finally pieced together the fact that it is Brigitte who is avoiding Egwene in the town, and they eventually debate if they can control Matt enough for him to be useful in Ibu Dar. Nynaeve eventually agrees to the plan, and then Sheriam enters, and Elaine and Nynaeve exit. They are apparently getting information on lost talent, so they can ask Moghedien about these things that they have not considered asking before. Sheriam then asks about Nynaeve and Matt, and is told that there is kind of normal maturation stuff going on there, and not any real tension between the individuals. At this point, we learn that Ramonda and Elaine both lectured Egwene on haste for different reasons, and Egwene pushes Sheriam on moving rather than just preparing to move the Aes Sedai. Egwene asks for specifics about Ibu Dar, and then she suggests that that staying still will label them as Dragonsworn, and so they eventually conclude that they cannot stay still, they cannot go to Ibu Dar, they are boxed into the east and west, and so the only direction to go is to the north. At this point, Egwene suggests that Rand might come to Saladar, which seems to worry Sheriam, who agrees that they will need to leave Saladar sooner than later. Egwene then says that they must move to the north, and Sheriam seems concerned, but agrees. As Egwene then begins to speak harshly, or she says she plans to speak harshly to Rand when she next sees him, and they begin to plan for how to get everyone on the move. So this, of all of the chapters, was the one where I had to say, and then they talked about 800 times in the summary. Interesting things, but this felt maybe more setup than the others. How did it keep you engaged? Because it sounded like this was a chapter you enjoyed at the beginning of our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think tonight's chapters as a group worked really well for me. This is probably the least exciting of the three, but felt important in that, again, we're seeing like that all these people we like aren't necessarily unified and headed in the same direction. And that just feels important that every time, we've seen... I would liken it to last week when it's like, oh, Egwene can do whatever she wants now, and then Robert Jordan's like, not so fast, right? This is like, oh, we have all these people here, oh, but they're not really going to get along, and they don't have the same goals yet.
Yeah, and seeing them assume what the others' goals were and kind of talk past each other is where I got kind of a lot of the enjoyment out of this chapter, right? The early part of the chapter where Matt lays out what Rand wants and Egwene lays out what she wants, and they bear absolutely no resemblance to one another, but they both insist it's going to happen. Like, figuring out how, kind of who wins the stare down is going to be really interesting, even though I just assume it's going to be Egwene. I cannot see Matt winning a stare anything.
Yeah, I think that's where my head was as well, right? Like, it just seems like, I think it's that he was turned into such a fool last chapter, but also just that he doesn't seem to care that much about this game, right?
Yeah.
And so it does feel like Egwene's going to get her way. She's going to outplay him.
Well, and I think that Egwene really reveals her trump card a little bit later on in the chapter when Nynaeve says, how are you going to get him to go along with this? And Egwene says, well, he promised Rand something. If I can figure out what it is, he always keeps his promises, so I can make him do whatever I want if it's getting him towards that promise. And I think the way that she ignores the things she doesn't want to about what Matt is saying and jumps on the ones that help her really, I think, tells us a lot about how Egwene is responding to what has to be a pretty crazy 48 hours, but she's kind of nailing it as far as I'm concerned in this conversation. There is what could be a hostile general in her room, and he ends up walking away looking for an advisor because he didn't get anything he wanted.
Yeah, and I mean, that just checks out. Well, and I'm thinking in my head about how she kind of makes fun of his title, even, right?
Yeah.
Like, she really just is outsmarting him in every way except that he has a thing to block her use of the power.
Yeah, I think we just need to be, or I guess we talked about this last chapter, like, someone, either Elaine or Egwene, got angry enough to channel at Matt. And I think that by the end of this chapter, we see them kind of back in their element, but someone is reacting emotionally there. There's no way that either Egwene or Elaine were just like, yeah, whatever, I'll slap him with the power. And so seeing how quickly they get themselves back under control is not how I would expect teenagers to react in this situation.
And again, just means like there was a moment where I felt like Egwene ascending means it's all just going to fold into Rand's camp and Rand can start moving forward. But like, yeah, if somebody is using the power because they're reacting that strongly to the way Matt's kind of approaching things, this is not going to be clean.
Yeah. And then the most annoying part of this chapter, everyone is telling us how great Egwene's plan is that we don't get to hear. How do you feel about this move from Robert Jordan? He's done this in kind of more oblique ways in the past of like people remembering the thought about the plan, but I don't think he's ever just like literally had the description be, and then Egwene told them her plan and just doesn't tell us what the plan is.
I mean, it's frustrating. So it seems like there's two choices, right? There's the like George Lucas, let me tell you exactly how the next half hour of this movie's going to go, and here you go. Or there's the let me make it clear that everybody is on board, but that you don't get to hear it and be on board yet, right? And I do think like this one can be pretty frustrating, but I assume it's not just like it's joy deferred, not joy, denied. And so I assume I'll be excited to see the plan as it unfurls.
So I don't know what else to bring up in this chapter, honestly, until Sheriam arrives, right? It's a lot of the same relationship dynamics we were talking about before in maybe a slightly new light. And I find it interesting to see Egwene kind of piecing things together, the things that she's not able to ask of, Nynaeve and Elaine, but nothing really jumped out at me. Were there any kind of moments or discussions in the rest of that kind of non-Sheriam part of the chapter that stood out to you or you had notes on?
I'm trying to remember the order of things quickly. I mean, I guess the fact, this is a little bit in the Sheriam part, I think, but like they're going to go ahead with Ebu Dar, and that seems to be what's going to happen, and Matt just has to go with them, and I assume he will, right? Because he, as is alluded to, he will keep his word to Rand. He'll just take this like, side quest first with them. And that made it more relevant to me that Elaine now maybe has the traveling power, right? So like I'm starting to map out what I think this book is going to be, and it's like I think that group is going to go, whereas maybe 2 chapters ago, I thought Elaine would just go with Matt on the long walk back. And now it's like, oh, I think Nynaeve and Elaine get to go. I think Egwene stays with the Saladar folks doing her plan. And then I assume then that they'll have whatever conflict and then can transport to Rand. So I still think by the end of this book, I'm guessing Elaine and Matt are back with Rand, but it will be more through virtue of traveling than like actual like let's go for a long walk across the continent.
Yeah, that would be way too few pages for a long walk across the continent, the way Robert Jordan writes. I do just want to note one thing related to that. That's actually, I think, partially in the previous chapter. But if we're talking about Nynaeve and Elaine and Matt and maybe a few other characters heading off to Ibudar, it's worth noting they are technically Aes Sedai, but none of the other Aes Sedai seem to think of Nynaeve and Elaine as being on the same level. Sheriam and even Siuan and also Romanda, a bunch of people in these chapters treat them just like they're accepted, even though technically by decree they are now on the same level as many of these other women. And technically, we learned a few chapters ago, the Aes Sedai kind of self-organized by power. Nynaeve should kind of be top dog if she were truly being acknowledged as Aes Sedai, and that clearly is not the case.
Well, I don't remember which chapter, but Egwene also references like the fact that she really can't order them to do things. Like if they want to go to Ebudar, she can't really stop them without.
Yeah, Aes Sedai are theoretically in charge of their own lives.
They're just free agents who check in. So all of that is interesting, but while that could be a source of conflict, it feels good enough that they're all going to head in these directions. Like they all seem to fit together, at least at the moment, but could be a source of conflict later.
So then Sheriam shows up, and it looks like Egwene is manipulating her very effectively, right? She directs the conversation to places like, well, if we can't walk towards Ibudar, I guess we have to walk exactly the direction that I'm suggesting. Or things like, well, if Romanda thinks it's a bad idea to stay here, we should probably get out immediately. Like, I think that it is shocking to me how unsubtle it feels like Egwene is being here. And Sheriam has kind of so bought into the idea that Egwene is just trying to figure things out that she's giving her exactly what she wants as the answer to her questions. And I don't know if that's Sheriam being not good at her job or Egwene being a deft manipulator, but it feels like it's almost too easy at this point.
Yeah, it read to me like, wow, Sheriam isn't as good as we thought she was, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little alarming considering I'm remembering this, right? That's kind of Sheriam is responsible for Egwene getting elevated, right?
Yeah, and is technically Egwene's second in command, so that's maybe not who you want as your second.
Yeah, but I think these chapters have demonstrated that Egwene doesn't really need her. Egwene has her stable of people, and I think she's got her own kind of effective cabinet. But does seem to still want to strengthen all those relationships. Like she's not writing anybody off. She wants everybody gathered to her as best she can get.
Well, and as much as we are saying, like, maybe Sheriam doesn't impress me as much as I expected, I'm really impressed by Egwene here and her ability to take Matt and incorporate it into her justification for moving, right? She, within seemingly 20 minutes, goes from I didn't know Rand knew where I was to now that there is a group of supposed shadow or Dragonsworn, we can't stay here because we will be labeled Dragonsworn. And if Rand sent the band here, he could send anyone he wants. That's really quick thinking by her. And I think her ability to take new information and work it into a plan that she had laid out for Elaine and Nynaeve recently, I think kind of shows us how flexible she is. And multiple times we've talked about the Aes Sedai as getting stuck on ideas or stuck in their ways. And so I think that flexibility is maybe what we've got to keep an eye on as the strength that the others in Saladar maybe don't have.
These ain't your daddy's Aes Sedai anymore, right? Like it just feels like this is a new age for this group. And, my head, it's constantly like, for all Aes Sedai eventually. I don't really doubt that this will be the dominant Aes Sedai when book 15 closes.
That would be impressive. There's 14 books. I know there's a prologue or a prequel, so you're allowed to say 15. But
well,
it's really
I'm
funny.
Actually going to write a new sequel when we get to
excellent.
that point.
Good. I'm excited to read it.
I don't want the podcast to end, so I'll just write another book and we can talk through it. Clearly, I'm the best candidate for that as the guy who can't remember any of these people anytime.
Speaking of not remembering, I almost just started summarizing Chapter 39 without transition like I do sometimes, even though we already did that. Next week, I will have 2 summaries for you. That is Chapter 40, Unexpected Laughter, and Chapter 41, A Threat. And Greg, we are 7 weeks away from the end of this book. It is coming up fast. How are you feeling? Because I know you mentioned momentum, kind of that feeling of forward propulsion this week, but it also feels like we are not especially close to an obvious big explosive conclusion like we've had in many of the previous books. There's no battle in Camelin or Forsaken somewhere that we've been building up to. We've got Samael and Ilion, but it doesn't feel like he's the real focus of this book. What are you expecting in those last 300-ish pages?
Well, I go back to the 14 book number. There, I switched for you. It just feels, it feels like this is now, by the time Robert Jordan is writing these books, he sees himself in a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that was a big change kind of book 5 is there wasn't that kind of big explosive ending. It's like a steady drumbeat. And so being not at all a runner, but when you watch a marathon on TV, there's kind of that initial big push to get out of the crowd and try to space yourself out a little more with like a small clump or, shadowing 1 or 2 people. And then there's just like in a marathon mile, like 4 through 23, where you're just like getting the mileage down, right? Like just pushing through. And it feels like we're there. So I'm not necessarily expecting like big flashy ending to this, because I think we're headed towards bigger and bigger things and we'll get there. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm excited to get a couple more chapters down. When we next we have to take a little break in recording, which always makes me frustrated. But I will try not to let that influence my opinion on them, because this book has started to cook and it's really fun and exciting. And maybe I'll go read tonight, and that way I will definitely not remember in 2 weeks when we sit down to record what happened. So either way, you'll be here listening because I alienate everybody, yet you keep coming back through the glass columns.
So ends another episode of Through the Glass Columns. We thank you for joining us and continuing with us on our quest to cover all of the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time.
This podcast features original content developed by Tylor and Greg Cass and is not in any way affiliated with, associated with, or condoned by the Robert Jordan Estate, Tor Fantasy, Amazon, or our wives. All content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please seek out the books from your local bookshop or library and join us as we continue our journey. If you'd like to contact us to share your thoughts or give feedback, find us on Instagram or Threads by searching Through the Glass Columns.
Thank you once again for being a part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, leave us a review wherever you are listening, and recommend this show on your social media to help us grow our community. We look forward to welcoming you back next time on Through the Glass Columns.